Hit it, boys.
Happy Thursday, HTF Bet fanatics. Welcome to another episode, and another new beginning of college football has opened up the doors. It is the Pac-12 finally getting underway. The three amigos and are ready to bring you guys the intakes and all that's going to go down up on the West Coast. Robert is going to be probably as excited as anybody, us, a fellow Trojan. Robert, Pac-12 is back, baby. How we feeling?
Hey, I hope USC doesn't let me down this season. I'm sure they will, though. They'll find a way. But, no, in all seriousness, I don't know what to expect out of this season. It's a really short season, 7 games. USC does not play a ranked opponent as of now, so they're ranked 20th. They're not facing any ranked teams. It looks good for them to make the Pac-12 championship, but I don't know. USC always finds 1 or 2 losses that they shouldn't sustain, and they'll sustain it. So I don't know. I don't have any confidence in a Clay Helton-led team. I don't really know what to expect out of this season. I like the offense a lot. I like the defensive line, but I don't know. I don't know what to expect out of this team. I just hope to see a competitive USC team this time around.
Well, fight on, Robert. That's all we can say, man, from up in Southern Cali. Nick, I mean, it's a little different for both of us. We're not really Pac-12 guys. I mean, I don't really stay up until 10:30 to watch the games, but how excited are you for the fact that we get some football back in the West Coast?
I think it's just great for the sport in general that we even get to have all the conferences playing at one time. We get to see the madness and the mayhem go on. So I think that's the silver lining. And there's a lot of teams you have our eye on here because I think this is very wide open right now. I don't think we have a clear-cut favorite, like they say. I mean, everybody's saying Oregon and USC. I think that's true, but I think that it's still – I don't think the gap between those teams and some of the other teams in this conference is pretty wide. So it's very interesting to see what happens.
You mentioned that, Nick, and I'm glad that we're able to talk to it now because the Pac-12 this year is obviously a lot different. I mean, Oregon last year, the reigning defending Pac-12 champions, won the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, but they've lost a lot of stars to the NFL, primarily Justin Herbert, who's been playing extremely well for the Chargers. I mean, who could say his decision, right? But, I mean, other than that, I mean, as you mentioned, USC, it's kind of up and down. We also have 2 primary contenders at plus 700, which is Washington and Utah. Robert, I want to start off with you. I mean, USC, they're a number 2 favorite to win the conference. You're not as confident in Clay Helton, but what are you maybe seeing this year from this team with the shorter games and, of course, hopefully at some point at least getting to play a ranked opponent that you might see out of this Trojans team that might not only save Clay Helton's job for another year, but also might get them over the hump and win the Pac-12 for the first time since 2017?
Yeah, I mean, with Clay Helton, I think they've already said that it would take a really bad losing record for him to be fired. So he is not on the hot seat this season for USC. They like him. I don't know why, but they do. So they're content with keeping him regardless of what happens, it seems like. But where it starts with USC, I think, is the offense. And it starts with Keaton Slovis, who's coming into his 2nd season. He looked great last year, came out of nowhere. JT Daniels goes down hurt. Matt Fink plays a little bit. And then Keaton Slovis comes in and looks like a real, true college football star. Probably is going to get into the Heisman conversation his next couple years. He's that good, I think. Then you look at the wide receivers. Yes, they lost Michael Pittman, but they still got Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's going to be probably a mid to late 2nd round pick in the NFL draft next year. He's really good. He's a great offensive threat for them. They got Marquise Stepp at running back, who's dealing with injury, but I think he's going to be able to come back this season. It's a tough team. Drake London's coming back. He's really good. I think there's a lot of nice players on that USC offense that can get the ball moving and get the yardage and the touchdowns that they need. Defense is a little shaky, but Elijah Vera Tucker coming back is a huge get for USC because he opted out and he opted back in. That's a huge get. That's NFL talent right there. That's coming back to play for the Trojans. So yeah, I do like their chances. I think they got a nice team, but it's really going to be questionable about where they stand overall because I don't want to overhype them, but it looks decent on paper. But again, USC in the last couple seasons under Helton have really underwhelmed. So I really don't know what to expect, but the offensive talent absolutely should be there for USC. And that's really where it starts for them.
I mean, paper doesn't get you far. Record tells you what you are. It's the same rhetoric each and every year for USC. Nick, I mean, Robert already gave us the analysis on the Trojans, but let's switch gears to the Pacific Northwest because I want to look at two teams, Oregon and Washington. Let's start off with Oregon. I mean, Mario Cristobal has finally gotten the Ducks back in terms of the highest ends of college football after last season's incredible run to the Pac-12 and their win over Wisconsin. Despite the loss of Justin Herbert and maybe a few other stars, what are you seeing maybe from this Oregon Ducks team? Are we going to get a repeat as well as Washington because they lose Jacob Eason, but I mean, I'm never doubting a Chris Peterson coach team. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think when you go to look at Oregon, they're going to be there absolutely. Big thing is going to be quarterback, replacing that production of Justin Herbert. And it's going to be either Tyler Show or it's going to be Anthony Brown, the grad transfer from Boston College. And Brown really wasn't all that impressive, I thought, all these years at Boston College, but he gets a second chance here with Oregon. And we really don't know who's going to start. Cristobal has been very, very quiet. And so is Joe Moorhead, the OC, this week about who's going to start this week against Stanford. So it's going to be a toss-up. And my guess is they both are going to play on Saturday, and they're going to ride the hot hand for the rest of the year. But I think they're going to rely on their run game a lot this year. And C.J. Verdell, he's one of the best all-around backs in college football. He's had back-to-back 1,000-yard years as a freshman and a sophomore. He gets his junior season right here where he gets to put a stamp and probably increase his draft stock for the NFL. Obviously, the biggest loss, I think, outside of Herbert is going to be Penny Sewell, who is consensus best left tackle in all of college football. He opted out and decided not to opt back in for this, electing to prepare himself for the NFL draft. That's a huge loss on an offensive line that already had lost Shane Lemieux, who you saw start at left guard on Monday night for the Giants. So big losses on that offensive line. We'll see what they can do there. And then defensively, they are pretty strong last year, and they're going to be led by Kayvon Thibodeau. You know, he was the number one overall recruit in his class. I mean, last year, 9 sacks as a freshman. Expect him to put up big numbers there. And then Washington, you know, it's a bit of a little transition for them because Jacob Eason is gone and the quarterback position is not solidified for them. And defensively, they're going to have to replace a lot of key players on a team that's always been defensively sound. So I'm not as high on Washington this year. And you know, they lost a pretty good amount of games with Jacob Eason at quarterback last year. They were not good at closing in games and they let a lot slip away. So I think Oregon actually has a very easy route on that side of the Pac-12. I think the other side of the Pac-12 with USC and Utah and Arizona State is going to be the much more interesting side.
No, I agree because with my prediction, because I look at Utah and Arizona State, primarily Arizona State, because Herm Edwards has, over the past couple of years, seems like he's found a way to get that program in a perfect thing. I mean, he has Jaden Daniels, who I think with Justin Herbert gone is, if not the best quarterback in the Pac-12 this year. I mean, this is going to be a sophomore year. This is going to be a big development year. Obviously, he plays a big-time game at USC. This is going to be the games that not only define define Herm Edwards and how it is, but it could define as well, okay, not only with USC, but how does this affect the program? Because I think Arizona State is a quiet sleeper in terms of this conference as well as the Pac-12, as well as the same conference, same division that they're in with USC, UCLA, because like I said, like you've seen and of course we all know how Arizona State over the last 2 years have done with upsets. My question, though, outside of is that can Herm Edwards get that defense going? Can we see Jaden Daniels run the spread better? And then for Utah, we have to look at who's going to be the quarterback for this Utes football team because we don't know if it's going to be Cam Rising or Jake Bentley. But Kyle Whittingham, he's always had a strong run game. You lose Zach Moss, who's going to be the next guy that steps up. You know, they've always had a strong built defense. So I look at Utah and Arizona State as sort of like those quiet contenders that not a lot of people are talking about, but they're always there. They're always going to fight, but I'm just saying watch out for Arizona State. I mean, Robert, let's talk about Arizona State. They play USC this coming Saturday. Are you at all concerned with Jaden Daniels coming in to the Coliseum and fighting potentially with Herm Edwards, knowing his history of upsets, bringing another one in LA?
Oh, yeah, Arizona State's a really tough team for USC to open up against. Like you said, you know, those two are going to, you know, Herm Edwards knows what he's doing. You know, he knows how to beat these teams. And I think there's a good chance for Arizona to come into the Coliseum and punch USC in the mouth. You know, there is, especially when you really don't know what you're going to see out of these teams because they haven't been playing for so long. You know, you don't really know what to expect. yeah, USC is the favorite, but yeah, absolutely. I think Arizona State has a really good chance there. Um, Arizona State's probably the toughest opponent that USC has on their schedule right now. You obviously look at Utah. Utah's the other one. Again, unranked teams, but USC doesn't have to play Cal. They don't have to play Oregon. That's really nice for USC that they don't have to play the other side of the conference. So the fact that they don't have to do that, yeah, right now the toughest teams are Arizona State and Utah, as far as maybe Washington as well. But yeah, those two absolutely. And again, opening up first game of the season, you don't know what to expect. Absolutely, Arizona State can go into the Coliseum and get an upset at like 9 a.m. in the morning. So it's an early game too.
No question. I mean, definitely you'll have to get your cup of coffee to get up for that game. Nick, I mean, we talked about Arizona State. I mean, obviously Jaden Daniels. How are we feeling about him? And not only with Arizona State and Herm Edwards getting the program to hopefully reach new heights in year 3.
I think it's a great time for them at the moment because the Pac-12, I think, is undoubtedly maybe the weakest conference that you're going to find in the Power Five, and it's a good chance for a team like Arizona State to step up and be that third best team in the conference, be that second best team. I don't think they're quite there yet to get there, to get to be the conference champion like an Oregon has been for so long, or how Stanford was in the mix for a while and now has fallen down the totem pole under David Shaw. But Herm Edwards definitely has them going in the right direction. I think they're going in the right direction with recruiting as well. And last year was a big step for them. I know the overall record didn't really show it, but they were in a lot of those games. It's just a very young team, and you have a true freshman quarterback like Jaden Daniels like that. I mean, that's this kind of stuff that's going to happen. But I think this year it's going to be much improved year 2 with Herm Edwards. And I think Arizona State, looking forward specifically this weekend, they're a 10.5 underdog against USC, and that's kind of surprising. I think that they're gonna lurk around in that game for a while, and I think USC is probably gonna win that one outright. But I would probably in a betting scenario, I would take Arizona State at the 10.5. I think that's too many points for a team like that. They're gonna keep it close, and I think it's gonna be under a touchdown kind of a game.
Herm Edwards is known for the dramatics. One of my favorite games last year was when he played Mike Leach when he was the coach at Washington State, and how close that they kept that game. I mean, really, for Mike Leach to lose to Herm Edwards, I mean, I was like, wow. You could definitely see. I guess that was the kiss of death with him obviously going to Mississippi State. And, we don't even know what's going to happen with Washington State. I don't think they're even much in the conversation. They're just rebuilding in. But you did mention Stanford. I want to get to them to a minute because they have a big question mark since KJ Costello left for Mississippi State. And obviously it's going to be who's going to be the main man at quarterback. Davis Mills is looking like he's going to be the front runner for the starting job. Since we're going to talk about the Oregon and Stanford game, Nick, I mean, does this look like an easy sweep under the rug for Oregon, or will Stanford probably pull off the upset like they've done lots of times against their rival?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think, only because there's a lot of uncertainty at that quarterback position for Oregon. It truly does scare me. And that's one of the reasons I think could hold them back from beating a USC is that quarterback. I just don't see the production right there. I think it's going to be too big of a drop off from Justin Herbert to either Show or Brown. And then Stanford, you mentioned it, David Mills coming in there at quarterback. They should be much improved in that position. And, Walker Little is going to be there anchoring that offensive line that is going to be very stout for Stanford. And, there's a couple other guys like a Paulson Adebo as well, who has a chance to really get his NFL draft stock back in order after a down season last year that's kind of kept him from going to the NFL draft. So there is some playmakers on this Stanford team, some important NFL type players that they have. And I think they're going to hang around in this Oregon game. I think Oregon ultimately will win the game, but I think it's going to be, a 2 touchdown or less game, which I think is actually an improvement for Stanford, given the way they've looked the past couple of seasons.
No, absolutely. I mean, it seems like they've always had like NFL talent back in the early 2010s, and then it's just like they still produce the talent, but it's like the wins and the quality of stuff haven't been there. It's been 5 years since they've been in really a New Year's Six bowl game when they thrashed Iowa with Christian McCaffrey at running back. It's been a different Stanford team. I mean, we've witnessed them in person. UCF slaughtered them, and you don't get that same type of scare anymore. And I really am concerned about David Shaw. I don't think he's on the hot seat, but with a season like this, Stanford's got to press the needle a little bit on him to try to get that program, right back. Or maybe they could wait for Jim Harbaugh to come back if Michigan doesn't work out, because it ain't working out right now. But otherwise than that, I mean, we've talked about a lot, maybe some of our favorites within the conference. But Robert, I mean, we may not look at all the teams, despite it's a shortened game, as like, okay, it's wide open. We already know who the top dogs are. But there are some teams that we kind of want to see maybe make some improvement or give a good scare. Is there any team within the North or within the other side, close to the West Coast, that you're looking at this year to maybe make a surprise jump or pull off an upset? Any team, maybe Cal, Colorado, Washington State, maybe Oregon State?
Yeah, I mean, I think with regards to some of the smaller teams, yeah, I think Cal's probably Cal's always a tough team. They're probably best positioned out of those four to, make a jump and upset one of these teams that they have to face. Again, they don't have to face USC. They usually play USC really, really tough, usually end up getting a win. So they unfortunately will not play USC. Good for USC. But, yeah, I mean, I think Cal's always a tough team. It's just really interesting. Again, the shortened season is going to be so weird for a lot of these teams that are supposed to be good that it's going to throw a lot of them off that, you can take advantage of that. So, I mean, besides Cal, you look at Arizona State, obviously not ranked, but so I would consider them a team that can get an upset or two, that they are a good team. I think they're well coached and, they can get an upset victory here and there.
No, absolutely. Nick, I mean, I've mentioned some of the teams. One team I'm looking at this year to see what might happen, he's had a lot of concerns. Chip Kelly. This is usually his bread and butter type of conference. Since he's come to UCLA, he hasn't brought that Chip Kelly magic to the Bruins. Is this the year, do you think, that UCLA moves on from Chip Kelly, or do you maybe see this maybe the year that the Bruins maybe start to turn the tide and maybe become the UCLA Bruins of old?
It's a tough proposition for Chip Kelly. I mean, on one hand, Urban Meyer has said this many times, and this is where I don't cut Chip Kelly much slack, is UCLA obviously needs some help in the recruiting process. They need some years to get recruiting going, but Urban Meyer has said it before, when you take over a program, those players are your players, and it's up to you to put those players in the right positions. And Chip Kelly has not been able to do that yet. And that his scheme is very specific to a certain type of player. And UCLA just doesn't have it. And they've lost Joshua Kelly this year to the NFL. And you see how much he's impressed for the LA Chargers. So that's a lot of production right there. And then the quarterback position is pretty unsettled because, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was not up to snuff last year for UCLA. It just wasn't good enough, especially with Chip Kelly's offense. It definitely was not. It was not a case of the old days where Chip Kelly had the great quarterbacks there running that Oregon system. It just didn't happen. And then defensively, they're an absolute mess. They weren't able to stay in most games. So this is one of those situations where it's going to take a while for UCLA to get back on course. And, we could say all we want that USC is not where they need to be right now to get back to their glory days. UCLA is not even close. They're still levels behind a USC. And I think that's what really matters with UCLA is getting back to that level where they could be competitive with the USCs in the world. And they're just not there. So this is a big year for Chip Kelly. And I think in a 7-game season, if we're looking at the end of the year and he's got 1 win or 2 wins, then it's going to be trouble for Chip Kelly. And you're going to start hearing people there in Los Angeles calling for his head.
No, I can imagine. Like I said, it's tough for me to really think like, okay, Chip Kelly has 7 games. It could turn the tide. I mean, we could say what we want, whether or not each team. It's like everybody's on a bit of a level playing ground. Not as much time to get together, not as much time for meetings, training camps, and what have you. So it's a toss-up. But we don't know what could happen. There's so much things that could swing in so many favors. But I am concerned, like you said, I mean, losing Joshua Kelly and the fact that the production players, you mentioned the quarterbacks, Chip Kelly doesn't have, again, now another running back like he did with LaMichael James or LeGarrette Blount back in the day. So I am concerned with UCLA, even though I feel this year with them just playing the teams within their division, like you can cut a little bit of slack, but it's just a matter of of making sure that at least with this shortened time that you have with your players, that you make the most of it and you get better. To wrap up this segment, I'm just going to do our final analysis with 2 questions. And Robert, I want to start with you. Outside of this Saturday, with obviously the noon game, 9 o'clock if you're on the West Coast, like you probably lived back in the day, what other games are you looking forward to this year, outside of maybe this Saturday going forward?
Probably USC UCLA, just because I want to see where it's the last game of the season. It's a rivalry classic. You want to see what happens there. I don't know where either team will be. You might have USC potentially going for the Pac-12 championship, and you might have UCLA being the worst in the conference. So I don't know. It's always interesting, but I always look forward to those two. Obviously I'm biased, but no, it's always that matchup because, I hate UCLA. I loathe UCLA. The only team I hate more than them is Notre Dame. So, absolutely, you live for these rivalry games, and that's the one I'm looking forward to the most, even in the condition these two teams are in.
You gonna miss the game with Notre Dame this year for the Shillelagh?
Well, not really, because Notre Dame has gotten USC's number the last few seasons. But no, yeah, you definitely miss the rivalry like that. Absolutely.
The one thing that I always got upset at with USC the last couple years when they played Notre Dame was when they went to South Bend back in 2017, and Sam Darnold, I think, had 2-3 interceptions that game. I was very upset with that because I was like, that was USC's best year to make the college football playoff. And, who knows if Sam Darnold has stayed one more year. I mean, he brought back life back to that program. And that's why it's getting me back to the glory days of when I was younger, and probably you, Robert, when it was Pete Carroll, Mark Sanchez, Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. Someday, it's coming. It's a new decade.
Been waiting too long.
Hey, you've waiting so long for your Lakers. You waited so long for your Dodgers. It's bound to happen. It's bound to happen. Nick, what other games maybe are you looking forward to maybe this Saturday or beyond?
I'm looking at USC and Utah. We mentioned Utah a little bit. I actually think Utah is going to be the big competition for a USC in that side of the division. And I'm predicting that game is going to decide, I think, who takes that side. And Utah has a lot of questions. They're a quarterback replacing a Tyler Huntley, replacing a Zach Moss at running back. And is it going to be Jake Bentley? Is it going to be Cam Rising? A lot of questions there. That a Kyle Whittingham team is always going to be defensively sound. And that's what they've always been able to hang their hat on. And he's really had Utah very consistent, the last 10, 12 years, quietly almost in the Pac-12. And defensively, they're losing a lot of starters, a Bradley Anae, a Terrell Burgess, a Jalen Johnson. That's just 3 off the top of my head right there, who were big-time players for them that are in the NFL now and doing good things. So it's going to be very hard to replace that for Utah, but I trust Kyle Whittingham that he's going to get them on track. And so I think it's going to be a pretty good matchup for Utah to see how their defense is going to hold up against USC, which I think is going to be the best offense in the Pac-12. So I look for that game to be maybe a decider for who can represent the Pac-12 on that side of the division.
Oh, absolutely. Like Utah's always been there the last couple years. They've only gotten so close, but yet, they just seem never to capture the brass ring. Utah's always been a good football program, but since their move to the Pac-12, they haven't quite, seemed like they've been like Utah when it was Urban Meyer back in the day, or Alex Smith, or when Kyle Whittingham, had them early upset Alabama. So you're right. I mean, like I said, I believe that this is the year that Kyle Whittingham could get his team maybe over the hump, maybe at least to a New Year's Six. That's my expectation. I'm going to say 2 games I'm looking forward to. One is going to be UCLA Oregon, because obviously I love storylines. Chip Kelly's going back to Autzen, the place where he built that program, obviously before he left, and things kind of went up and down for them. But I'm interested to see that game, interested to see how that plays out. And then, of course, Stanford Cal, one of my favorite games of the year as well, running on the field with the band and everything in Cal. It's always a fun game. I'm looking forward to that. Man, we're going to get so much good of these teams, hopefully something. So my last question, Nick, with the shortened season, we are concerned a little bit because of how effective these quality of wins are going to be in the conference. Do you see the winner of the Pac-12 making the college football playoff? And if not, why?
It's a hard sell, when everybody else is playing more games. But, the Big Ten's not playing a full schedule either. But I think we all can agree Ohio State is just so good that regardless of what happens with, I think if they go undefeated, you have to put them in the college football playoff, because if you're going off strictly the eye test, that's one of the 4 best teams in college football. I don't think you're going to see that with any of the Pac-12 teams. So even if a Pac-12 team runs the table here in this conference, I think you're going to have a lot of people saying, oh, the conference is weak. They only played 7 games. And going off the eye test, I don't think any of these teams are really going to look like one of the 4 best teams in the nation. If anybody's going to have it, it's going to be USC, in my opinion. But even then, I don't think they're talented enough yet across the board. Robert he's a big fan of USC, and he keeps up with it more than a lot of people, and I think he'd have to agree with that. The talent there, I don't think, is a top 4 college football playoff team. So I think that's going to be the problem with the Pac-12. So I don't think we're going to have a representative in there, unfortunately. The only thing that helps them is the Big 12 has done their best to take their case out of it. It's really down to Oklahoma State, and it's not looking too pretty there. I don't think right now either, based on the way they've been playing lately. So that's their only hope, is that the Big 12 has taken them out. And unless Cincinnati runs the table, I don't think you're going to see a team outside of the Power 5 get in. So I'm going to go with no right now for the Pac-12, though.
Robert, you've heard Nick's take. I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of factors. Big 12 likely out. Cincinnati potentially running the table. You even have to include Notre Dame. I know you're going to say no to this, but if USC does hopefully run the table, could they potentially get in just because of their name alone? Could they hopefully get in if there are more quality wins within the conference, or do you think it's just going to be a New Year's 6?
Yeah, it'll be a New Year's 6. They're not a blue blood team right now. They don't have it anymore. They haven't had it for quite a while. As far as getting into the football playoff, it's exactly like Nick said. There's not going to be enough quality wins here in a 7-game span for USC or even Oregon to get into that conversation. There's just not. They don't play a ranked team, and the only way you get another team ranked in the Pac-12 is if one of them beats the already ranked teams. So it's going to be interesting. The Big 12 obviously keeps falling. Texas is way underperformed. Oklahoma's number 18 now. They've completely dropped out of the conversation. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. I think your 4 is pretty much decided. It's probably going to be 3 SEC teams and, one from the ACC, which is, Clemson, obviously. I don't see the rest of the Pac-12 getting anywhere close. I don't think USC is going to get close. I don't think Oregon's going to get close. And I don't think any of the Big 12 teams are going to get really close, except maybe, like you said, Oklahoma State. So it's going to be interesting to see. But no, I don't think it matters if they win out. If they win the Pac-12 championship, they're not going to be taken seriously enough to get into to get into the top 4. I think it's already pretty much decided.
Man, you wish you could turn back the clock back to 2016 when it was Washington's year and how good they were. I mean, they looked unstoppable. If only maybe you had that same Washington caliber team today, or even for USC, back in 2017 as well. I think that would be out. I'm going to agree with you guys. I'm going to say no. But like I said, we obviously have our favorites. Robert, you believe USC. Nick, I think you said either between Utah or Oregon, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
4th favorite?
Yeah, for the Pac-12.
I think it's USC. Yeah.
USC. So USC across the board. I'm just going to go a little bit with the underdog, which is Utah, but I'm just saying this. Be prepared for Arizona State to do something special this year, because if they could even get to the Pac-12 conference championship game, that's just even the big step Herm Edwards needs. Like I said, I think Jaden Daniels will showcase that he is the best quarterback in the conference, and we're going to be in for a treat, folks. So we'll stay tuned for that. So coming up next, we're going to go dive into fantasy football and then talk our game picks for the week. Be surprised, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give you a huge spoiler for Saturday. Stay tuned. HTF Bets will be right back.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to HTF Bets. Here in our second segment, we're joined by the host of Almost Game Day and the namesake of the show, Mr. Sean Green. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It was crazy a couple nights ago. I'm refreshed. I'm ready to go. And we got a big fantasy matchup this week, so I'm excited to be on.
Yep, Sean played me this past week. I lost par for the course there. I expected him to beat me. Was let down a couple bit, like Lamar Jackson let me down. Not surprised. The Steelers are real good, so it's not been great for me. Okelo's 0-8 now in fantasy for our winless update of the week. It seems like that's becoming a weekly segment now, where Okelo loses his fantasy game. And it's not looking much better for Okelo next week. He has to play Sean, so I don't know. I don't know what to say. Okelo, I know you're not super thrilled with your team, but hopefully you'll get that win before the Jets.
Man, look. I knew I was doomed the minute I played Kayla because she had Patrick Mahomes. But if Boston Scott had gotten in the end zone, I would have had a chance. Another week, same old issue. I'm not as confident playing Sean this week, so let's just get
You're
it
not
over
confident. Come on now.
Look, I mean, I made a
He's
trade
making it closer.
early. I'm getting closer each and every week, but it's like I can't seal the deal. I'm either like the Chargers or I'm like the Falcons. Like I can't seal the deal. So let's just get it over with. I'm just ready to go 0-9.
Well, that being said, we're gonna do our starts and sit of the week like we do every week here at HTF Bets. Nick, I'm gonna start with you. Who is your start for this week?
I'm going to go with Sterling Shepard. He's only been healthy, and this has been a knock on him for a large part of his career. He's only been healthy for 3 games this year, but in those games, he's had 10 points, 15, and 17, which I think is pretty solid flex value for an offense that really has not been humming all year long. But it's a good news, I think, that he has become Daniel Jones's favorite target on that offense, which I think is a very underrated, has some very underrated skill guys there with Tate, Ingram, and Slayton, and, of course, Sterling Shepard. So I think he's got decent fantasy value. His matchup this week is kind of middle of the road against Washington, which has been a lot better on defense than a lot of us expected. But I think given the fact that Golden Tate has been really a non-factor in the passing game and Slayton's been really boom or bust, Sterling Shepard's been kind of the underneath guy for Daniel Jones all year long. And so I think he can get you double-digit fantasy points. It's kind of like a flex play this week.
Yeah, for sure. He's been absolutely Daniel Jones's favorite target right now. Certainly probably going to get the points, certainly more than Darius Slayton. I think as I said last week, Darius Slayton's kind of the number 3 option at this point. So good pick there. Sean, I'm going to go to you next. Who's your start, for this week?
Oh, you're going to me before Okelo? Come on.
All right, I'll go to Okelo first then.
Yeah, go to Okelo first.
I'll go to Okelo.
Okelo.
Who's your start?
I'm going to go for an easy matchup compared to Nick's matchup. And this is a guy who I think his fantasy value is going to increase this week because of a lot that's going on with the team. His name, Marvin Jones. Why? Kenny Golladay is out, and he's playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a bun secondary. Matthew Stafford is going to look to him more. The Vikings have given up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. This is a can't-miss matchup. I know Marvin Jones has been a little inconsistent this year, but this injury should help him. I don't see anybody else other than TJ Hawkinson for Matthew Stafford as the go-to. Look for him to now be the number 1 receiver in Detroit for the time being. And with this matchup, it's a win, baby. Minnesota, it's going to be a high-scoring game. And Marvin Jones has always played great historically against the Vikings, so I don't see any drop-off with him. If you have Marvin Jones, you play him this week, and he's going to get you 2 touchdowns like he did against the Colts. I guarantee it.
Fair enough. Sean, now what's your start?
See, it's not my show, but every time I come on your guys' show, I don't know why, but my starts and sits suck. I don't know what it is. I think I make good picks. So I'm going with I'm just going to say my sit first because I feel like the best way to go about this is to just go against what Okelo's telling you. So instead of starting, my sit is going to be Marvin Jones Jr. Listen, he's playing a Vikings. He's playing a decent Vikings team. They played the Packers pretty well. Like, I think we're all forgetting that this Vikings team, they're 2-5, but defense is kind of finding a footing here. The secondary is playing better. Devontae Adams went off against, the Vikings secondary. But I think the best way to go about this is just do not start Marvin Jones Jr. because he's not going to put up points this week.
All right, fair enough. So let's get since we're going to go around now and do our sits, I guess I'll go first here, and then I'll get to you, Sean, with the start. For my start this week, I think it's got to be Matthew Stafford. I know we're just talking about the Lions and the Vikings here. I really like what Matt Stafford's showing this season. The last few weeks, he's been really, really good. I mean, even in that 41-21 loss to the Colts this past weekend, he put up 3 touchdowns and put up 22 points in fantasy. So he's been a really nice fantasy ad. He's on my team now. I'm considering starting him over Lamar this week since Lamar's playing Indianapolis. No, I really like where Matt Stafford sits. He's looking like vintage Matt Stafford. The one knock on him right now is, he doesn't have Kenny Golladay. That hurts a bit. But it should make up for it for the fact that he does have Marvin Jones. So hopefully goes against what Sean projects for him. And hopefully he is able to find his game with TJ Hawkinson as well. I think Matt Stafford against a really bad Vikings secondary should hopefully find the end zone a couple times and put up some nice points this week for your fantasy team. So now, Sean, we're going to do our our sit. Who is your sit for this week?
Well, my sit was Marvin Jones. See, I messed with your head, Robert.
See, now
I
you got
messed
me
with
off.
it.
Now you
I
got me
shouldn't
off.
have done it.
I was right the first time. I said start, and then I said
I know. I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. This is what has to happen this week, unfortunately.
Okay, so who is your – I'll go to Okelo first. Okelo, who is your sit?
My sit this week, Teddy freaking Bridgewater. Why? Because he's playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who their defense usually is not that good, but this year they've given up the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. I had him in one of my leagues last week expecting him to ball out against the Falcons. I'm concerned about the injury, even though that he's looked like he's been practicing well with it, but you're traveling to Arrowhead Stadium, a tough environment to play in, and, you know, all the quarterbacks, with the exception of Deshaun Watson this year, have only gotten a max of 20 fantasy points in this game. This is not a matchup I'm going to trust. Like I said, I love Teddy Bridgewater. I think this could be a high-scoring game, but, you know, the records and all the numbers have shown when you travel to Arrowhead Stadium, you're going to have a problem. I think there are better options at quarterback this week that you can go to. So if you have Teddy Bridgewater, I think that you should leave him on your bench this week and maybe look for somebody else within the waiver wire to go to, like Big Ben Roethlisberger against the Dallas Cowboys.
Fair enough. And then, Sean, I'll go straight to you. I have a feeling I know where you're going to go with your start. So,
why didn't Okelo put Big Ben as his start? That's actually a really good pick. And so I'm kind of confused there. That was a good take, Okelo. So Okelo's friends, I think, are going to hate me. I think they already do, but it's okay. You know, we love controversy here at HTF Bets. I would say start Teddy Bridgewater. Listen, you look at Kansas City, and I don't okay, 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Who has Kansas City played? Like, honestly, what was the quarterbacks that Kansas City has played? Brian Hoyer? Congrats. You held them to, what, 2 points? Good job.
Josh Allen held under to 19.
Look what Josh Allen did against New England last week. Okay, so Josh Allen, against bad teams, Josh Allen puts up points. But against decent teams, yeah, Josh Allen's not that good. I'm looking at the matchup right here. And I don't necessarily, like, to most people's eye, you might not want to start him. But Kansas City's defense for years has not been great. Those corners are not that good. Carolina's got some weapons on the outside. Like, don't get me wrong, Robbie Anderson is going to – I assume he's going to have a big game. So if you have him, I'd start him as well.
He just needs to get in the damn end zone. That's all I need.
Hey, receptions are just as important. Like, so, you know, I'm not looking at that so much. But, yeah, I would say go Teddy Bridgewater. I don't agree with Okelo on that. So I would say start Teddy Bridgewater if you have him.
all right, fair enough. Yeah, well, I mean, Carolina's offense, you know, DJ Moore's there. You know, you got Robbie Anderson. And now, hopefully, this week, at least for my fantasy team, and I'm sure many of the other that took him first overall, Christian McCaffrey should be back this weekend for the first time in a while. So hopefully we'll see that. Nick, who is your sit for this week?
I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor. And, you know, he's dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury, and he's going to be questionable to play this week. And I think my message to fantasy owners is don't waste your time. Don't bother, because he's going to face the Baltimore defense, which is very stingy against the run, and they're coming off a loss against Pittsburgh, and I think they're going to be motivated to avenge that loss this week against Indianapolis. And then also last week when Jonathan Taylor did play most of the game, he only got 11 carries for 22 yards, and Jordan Wilkins took over, and he got 20 touches. And you saw Nyheim Hines, he's been the receiving back. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. So Jonathan Taylor hasn't even been a factor in the passing game all year, which you typically want to see out of a running back too, which is what Jonathan Taylor was drafted to be in most cases. So I just don't see it for Jonathan Taylor this week with the injury or without the injury. I think you don't waste your time, and I think anybody in that backfield for Indianapolis this week is probably trouble because of Baltimore's defense.
Very smart pick. Very smart pick.
Very smart pick. I agree. I'm going to go with this. I think for my sit this week, I'm sure this is going to bring a smile to Okelo's face. The Cowboys are terrible, and they got to play the Steelers this week. And they got to play arguably the best defense in the NFL and the hottest team in the NFL, the only undefeated team in the NFL. So, listen, the Cowboys, I don't know what to think anymore. This offense is good, but they don't have a quarterback. Now, apparently, Cooper Rush or Garrett Gilbert are going to start this weekend instead of Ben DiNucci. They're on their 4th quarterback this season already. You can't start any of these guys on the Cowboys offense. Sean knows Ezekiel Elliott got him about 8 points. Amari Cooper got me about 4.
Getting him off my back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. And right now, the rest of the season looks very much in doubt for having any of the Cowboys offense on your team starting. But I'm going to have to pick one of them to sit. I'm going to pick CeeDee Lamb to sit. CeeDee Lamb has not been getting the targets. He's been getting like 5 targets a game now. It seemed like him and Andy Dalton had some sort of chemistry. Dalton's injured. That changed last week. DiNucci found Michael Gallup. He got like 15 points in fantasy. But, yeah, I just don't know what to think with this Cowboys offense. I think it's way, way too unpredictable at this point, and I can't risk it. I don't think anybody should risk it if you own some of these Cowboys receivers or even a running back like Ezekiel Elliott, because it's just not there. And they got to play against the Steelers, so I don't like their chances. But well said, boys. I appreciate you all being on for this. Well, that does it for this segment. I appreciate you boys being on to talk, start, sit. We love doing this every week. Love doing our fantasy. Love seeing Okelo go 0-8, about to go 0-9. It's great. I'm sure I want to see him get a win. I think I'm the one here that's rooting for him to get a win at some point. I don't want to see him go 0-12, but hey,
Robert, you're crazy if you don't want to see him not win a game. Come on now.
I have sympathy, but you know what?
At least we have some damn human beings on this damn show.
That's true. I am a human being last time I checked. So that'll do it for this segment. In our next segment, we'll talk our bets of the week. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to HTF Bets, where we are going to dive in now in our last segment, our bet of the week, which we do every single week here on HTF Bets. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. Robert, give me your bet of the week. Who do you have?
Mine is the Buccaneers beating the Saints this time around. They faced in the very first game of the season between these two teams. Saints took that one at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans. I think the Buccaneers are going to have the upper hand here. The Buccaneers have been locked in for the last few weeks. They look like the team we thought they would be. Antonio Brown's probably making his debut this week. We'll see what they get out of him for the Buccaneers. I really like this Buccaneers team. They're defensive sack leaders. They know how to sack the quarterback. They know how they can get to Breeze and make him frustrated. The Saints offense is still really questionable with Michael Thomas and stuff and stuff like that. So I worry about the Saints there. I think the Buccaneers, though, they're favored at -4.5. I think they'll win by at least a touchdown. I think they'll cover the spread. I think they'll win this game. I think the Buccaneers are just going to keep rolling on. I think this is the team to beat right now in the NFC.
I like the way you think, Robert. I like the way you think, and I would love to see the Bucs be 7-2 after surviving Monday night against the Giants. I'm going to switch to you now, Okelo. What game are you looking at? You have your eyes on as a bettor this weekend.
Well, last week I was doing NFL. I took an L, believing that this was going to be the game that Cam Newton would win, but he fumbled it away. So I'm going to switch to college football. The biggest game on Saturday on NBC, Clemson, Notre Dame. I know Clemson seems like they're the heavy favorite, despite they don't have Trevor Lawrence because they have the best back in the country, Travis Etienne. But this year, Notre Dame has woken up big time. I think this is the biggest game that Ian Book could ask for, that Brian Kelly could ask for, because we all know what happened a couple years ago when it was the Cotton Bowl, the college football playoff, and Notre Dame got thrashed by Trevor Lawrence on his way to the national championship. There's no Trevor Lawrence this time around. We're going to South Bend. Now, I always like to do this. I've never done this in my life until today, but I am going to pick Notre Dame for the upset. Why? Because last week they were that close to losing to Boston College, and without Trevor Lawrence, I don't see how this can go. I'm picking the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to win the game by +6.5. It's going to be a tight game, but I believe in Ian Book. I believe in this Fighting Irish team. This is the game where they need to keep that hold for number 4 in the college football playoff. This is Notre Dame's year to get back in it and hopefully give some good competition. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I am taking the Fighting Irish to upset the Clemson Tigers for their first L of the season.
Well, I see you're going big this week. I see you're going big for sure. And, Clemson, I guess so. We'll see what happens with that one, Okelo. But I'm gonna stick in college football. And, let's face it. Last week I called Rutgers. I thought they were going to win outright. I went big, saying that they would beat Indiana.
They came close to the spread.
Came close to the spread. It just didn't work out for me. I'm going to go on a limb on another one, but I think this one has a little bit more realistic chance of happening. Is Friday night, Miami will travel to play NC State. at NC State, and they are a 12.5-point favorite, Miami is. I think that's entirely too much. NC State is 4-2. I think they've been rock solid this year. Miami, the last couple of weeks against Pittsburgh and Virginia, I mean, they're coming off a 5-point win against Virginia, for crying out loud. I mean, they have not really – I don't think they've looked that great since the Clemson loss. And I am predicting that NC State is going to upset Miami this week and send the Hurricanes to 2 losses this year and take them truly out of contention for anything big in regards to bowl games this season. I think NC State is going to beat them.
Whoa. Nick, you going crazy again this week. Are you sure we don't need to take a drug test for you? Because this is back-to-back weeks of insanity that you're speaking.
I mean, okay, every week when we do the fantasy football segment, we got to drug test you on the spot. So I mean, don't come at me now for my bets. I'm sticking with that.
Do you come to the show drunk at all? Like, I just need to know, because last week when you picked Indiana, I was so damn disgusted with that pick. It was just one game that they had, and you took Rutgers, and they didn't even come close to even closing out the spread with that crazy lateral all the way for the touchdown. They didn't even win the game. It wasn't no Miami or Rutgers miracle, man.
Okay, well, you know what? You need to use your eyes. Miami has not looked good the past 2 weeks, and that's just a fact. They have not looked good. NC State's a very stringy team.
The bricks off the Wolfpack. You really think that they're going to come into this game and really upset Miami? They ain't got a chance.
Oh yeah, at home.
Man, you don't know De'Aaron King, man. Okay, I'll admit they haven't looked good, but they played
impressive the last couple of weeks. Last 3 weeks for De'Aaron King have not been impressed.
Bounce back on Friday night under the lights.
You know, Miami's due to lose. They're due to lose one of these games against one of these inferior opponents every single year. And I don't think it's any different this year. I think this year it's going to be NC State. And NC State has a knack for knocking off teams who are supposedly the best in the conference.
Guys, listen to Nick if you want to take a fresh, hot L this week, because if Rutgers –
You picked Notre Dame to win a big game.
This is no Trevor Lawrence, no, and he's going to be on the sideline, potentially hurting his other teammates. Do you really believe that?
Yeah, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. Great teams find ways to win. Clemson's going to get it done no matter what.
I'm putting my money on Ian Book. Clemson's not going to have an answer. Their defense looks atrocious. They have no defense. They're nothing, and Ian Book is going to expose them and be able to continue to play the way that he's had.
Well, we'll see how your pocketbook looks at the end of this weekend. We'll see how mine looks and Robert looks as well. But that's all the time we have left here today on HTF Bets. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.